to kind of get us into the subject matter of Chapter 4, which is ethics in IT. There's a short video I'm going to show you.
Pizza Palace here. You have 30 minutes or 3 minutes. Mary, may I take your order?
Hi, Mary. Yes, I'd like to order.
This is Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Thank you for calling again, sir. I share your national identification number as 610-204-999-8-45-5461. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. I see you live at 736 Montrose Court, but you're calling from your cell phone. Are you at home?
I'm just leaving work, but I'm...
Oh, we can deliver to Bob's Auto Supply. That's at 175 Lincoln Avenue, yes?
No, I'm on my way home. How do you know all this stuff?
We just got wired into the system, sir.
Oh, well, I'd like to order a couple of your double meat special pizzas.
Sure thing. There'll be a new $20 charge for this, sir.
What do you mean?
Sir, the system shows me that your medical records indicate that you have high blood pressure and extremely high cholesterol. Luckily, we have a new agreement with your national health care provider that allows us to send you double meat pies as long as you agree to waive all future claims of liability.
What?
Do you agree, sir? You can sign the form when we deliver, but there is a charge for processing. The total is $67.
$67?
That includes the delivery surcharge of $15 to cover the added risk to our driver of traveling through an orange zone.
I live in an orange zone?
Now you do. Looks like there was another robbery on Montrose yesterday. You could save $48 if you ordered our special spread submarine combo and picked up yourself. Comes with tofu sticks. Those are very tasty, sir. Good value, too.
But I want double meat.
Well, I'm sure you can afford the $67 then. You just bought those tickets from Hawaii. They weren't cheap, eh? Oh. But I see you checked out the budget beach farm in the library last week. Up to you, sir.
Right. I'll get the sprout subs.
Your choice, sir. Gotta watch that waist if you're hitting the beach, eh? 42 inches. Wow. And I'd say tofu and sprouts is like required.
That's how much?
Just between you and me, there's a $3 off coupon in this month's Total Men's Fitness magazine. Your wife Betty subscribes to that, right? Anyhow, click that and it's $19.99 even. Whoa, looks like you maxed out on all your credit cards. Bring cash, okay?
Want to stop this from happening?
So that's just an interesting take on how the internet and internet technologies have affected our expectations of privacy and information sharing. And that's one of the major, this idea of privacy or lack thereof is one of the major facets of ethics in information systems. Okay, so we're going to talk about some ethical, talk about ethics and talk about some of the important concepts in regards to ethics and particularly information systems. Okay. There are some, they give you some examples in the book of bad judgment in regards to business and ethical dilemmas that managerial decision-making has caused. A couple of those examples include Epsilon and Pfizer. Epsilon had a recent breach of information. Epsilon is a company that they're an online marketing company, and they service companies like Citi, Chase, Capital One, Ritz-Carlton, Verizon, Walgreens, Visa, and they had a major data breach. This happened actually earlier last year. You may have noticed, I remember when this happened, I received online form letters from different accounts that I had that basically said there was a breach. It's usually, if you get those breach notifications, they're usually somewhat vague. They tell you there was a breach, your information may have been a part of that, and they try to give you the scope of it. Well, it may not have had Social Security information, other types of information. Here in California, we have a state law that says that if your information, if there's an information breach with a company that you do business with, they are required by law to inform you of that breach. Okay, they're not required to take any protective steps, although some companies will do that. But they are required by law, but it's a state law. So you go to another state and they may or may not have the same protections. And actually, in California, we're in regards to our system of law and our different protections that we have, we're relatively progressive. We have more protections than a lot of other states, and when we enforce these protections, a lot of times other states across the nation watch to see how our use of these laws affects the populace, how it's received by the public, stuff like that, before they actually look at pursuing similar laws. Okay. The other one is Pfizer. This was another security breach information. This one was a little bit older. This is back in 2007. But this was employee data. Around 17,000 employees. It was data that was held on a laptop or laptops, and it had employee information, including things like social security numbers, addresses, enough information that if it got in the wrong hands, it would, you would have victims that could be subject to identity theft. Okay, and there's a lot of companies. There was a few years back, the Veterans Association had a laptop that was stolen out of an employee's car. It turned out the employee was not even supposed to have that laptop outside of the organization. It was stolen, and it had veteran information, including personal information like social security numbers and other information. Right, and you have to think about all of the information that's gathered about us through our use of technology, our business relationships with organizations, all of that information that they're getting from us. How are they protecting that information, right? So we're going to talk about some of the ways that organizations can protect that information, some of the laws that govern some of these protections, and look at the fact that this isn't, there's no universal standard for things like security and protections. Okay. When we talk about this idea of ethics, this concept of ethics, ethics is this idea of your principles of what's right and what's wrong. And the thing about ethics is that ethics are not always aligned with things that are considered ethical or unethical, are not always aligned with what society considers things that are illegal versus not legal. Okay, so you have you have activities that maybe there's no law to govern that it's not right, but as a society, maybe we believe that it's an unethical action, right? And with the technological advances that we see in business environments, our system of law here in the U.S. is not a very proactive system. It's a very reactive system. When I say that, I mean that usually laws come into place because there is a shared awareness that there's something that's happening that we don't think should be happening. Okay, so it's usually there's a lot of some sort of behavior happening. There's a shared recognition that we don't like that behavior. We don't think it's ethical. We don't think it should be legal. And then laws come into place after the fact to make those activities illegal. Things like the texting rule and talking on your cell phone, right? There was a realization that that was an issue. That was something that we needed to put a stop to. And the laws came in after that realization. Okay, so I can speak particularly to the U.S. U.S. laws and our system of law. Okay, so when you think about the things that we as individuals or as organizations find ethical versus not ethical. It's a very subjective set of values that we have. One person might think that something is ethical, and somebody else might examine that same situation, that same issue, and think that it's not ethical. Okay, so it's a very subjective, and again, that stuff can change from one organization to another. Chapter 3, we talked about some of the differences from one organization to another, the structure, the politics, the culture of an organization, and all of those things together can change the view that shared view that the people in an organization have of what's ethical and what's not ethical, right? When we talk about the financial crises that a lot of experts say were a major cause to the economic downturn that we had, right? They generally, experts say that a lot of the bad loans that banks were making, right? Loans that were not sustainable, loans that mortgage loans that led to the real estate bubble that we had, right? That was a major factor, played a major factor in the recession and the economic downturn that we had. Okay, so and the businesses that were involved in that at the time, they probably didn't think they were doing anything wrong, right? But all of those activities that, upon later examination, were generally found to be unethical, right? Kind of led to what the current situation that we have. Okay. So information systems and the technology that businesses are utilizing have opened up new possibilities for good and bad. Okay, it's created a lot of social change, changing things like distributions of power, rights, and obligations, has changed the way, the things that we, from basic things like etiquette, the things that we find acceptable in social circles, right? Nowadays, people, the society, seeing people walking down the street talking to themselves, right? We think about that in a different way than we used to, right? We probably assume, first of all, that they're probably talking to somebody on their cell phone using some kind of earpiece, right? That's probably the first assumption we make, and then we notice maybe they don't have an earpiece in, right? So that's a little bit different, right? But there's a lot, the way that technology has changed our social expectations and has created some of these, these ethical dilemmas, okay? Of course, it's fostered new types of crime. Organized crime, most of organized crime has moved online. Right? It's much easier for them, less costs, much easier for them to perpetrate crime using things like phishing and phishing with a PH and other types of email scams, right? So we can kind of think, we can kind of put technology, think of this model for how technology affects society. Okay, you can think of a picture, a body of water, a small pond, very calm, no ripples in it. You drop a stone in the middle of it and you see ripples that come out from where that stone has dropped. That stone could be technology, okay, and the effects that technology has on society, the ripple effects that we see, it's hard for organizations, it's hard for society to adjust to the changes that technology has created. Right, and there's 5 different areas, moral dimensions of the use of technology. Right, accountability and control, who is responsible for a particular action, information rights and obligations, property rights and obligations, who owns what information, system quality, we're actually going to talk about each one of these in a little more detail, and quality of life issues. Okay, some of the ones that I was talking about earlier were kind of quality of life. Okay. So those are the 5 different moral dimensions, and we're actually going to talk about each one in a little bit more detail later on. Okay. Some of the technology trends that help to raise some of these ethical issues include things like Gordon Moore's the law that states that about every 2 years computing power doubles. Gordon Moore he's actually one of the founders of Intel. And he stated this, there's different versions of it. Some of them say 18 months, some of them, your book says doubling every 2 years. That the processing power would double every 2 years. He stated this back in early 1971. Okay, and for that to have actually held true for the past 42 years is pretty impressive. Because your computing power is still doubling about every 2 years, every year and a half or so. Okay. The rapidly declining storage costs. You can actually see this when you're looking at consumer electronics, flash drives, right? And any of you guys have flash drives with you right now? What are the sizes of your flash drive that you have?
1 gig.
1 gig? Anybody else?
16 gig or something.
16.8, right? As the price of flash drives has dropped over time. I remember paying $20 for like a 2 gig flash drive. Right? Doesn't happen anymore. For $20, you can usually get about 8 gigs now. Maybe 16, depending on where you get it, right? And if you're shopping for computers, you can also see the changes in hard drive space, right? What's the current, for desktop computers, anybody gone shopping for desktop computers lately, what's the current hard drive size? What's kind of the standard? It's actually, huh?
Like 750 gig.
Yeah, somewhere, 500, 750, a terabyte worth of space, right? And a terabyte is 1,024 gigabytes. Okay, so that's that's give or take the standard. I can get if I want to pay enough money, I can get a small drive that will hold a terabyte worth of data on it. Yeah, yeah. Kind of a little bit on the pricey side right now, as far as I'm concerned. But it's if I wait another 6 months, another year, it'll be cheaper, right? So the rapidly declining storage costs, and we see that on a micro level in those examples I gave you. But with companies, right? Organizational storage is somewhere currently in the petabytes. Petabytes are 1,024 terabytes. Okay, and I think the next level, if I remember right, is called zettabytes. Okay, another 5 to 10 years, organizational storage, will be enterprise level storage will be in the zettabytes, right? So it's much easier for organizations to store very detailed information about people, to create these profiles or dossiers of individuals, to resell this information. Okay. The networking advances on the internet, the much faster upload and download speeds that we see, being able to to share information or copy it from one place to another. Flash drives have actually created a lot of physical security concerns for organizations. There are some federal buildings you cannot enter or leave with a portable storage device, because they're so easy to plug into a computer, possibly uploading some kind of virus or downloading information to the storage device, pull it out, and you're on your way. Put it in your pocket, right? Yeah.
Like every time I'm still in the reserves, and every time, or even when I was active, you put in your CAD card, and the first thing it says is like, you cannot put a flash drive in your computer. You have to put it in your
Right.
So they watch that stuff.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, because it's so easy, right? And if it's text documents, you can get, thousands of pages of text documents, on a flash drive. So it's caused, these advances in technology have created a lot of security concerns, privacy concerns, ethical dilemmas that organizations and individuals have to deal with. Okay. Advances in data analysis techniques, things like profiling, combining information from multiple sources to come up with a full kind of profile of an individual. Okay, what are some of the organizations that keep information about you that's actually freely available to the public? Can you think of any organizations? Most likely it's going to be,
all over.
And it's not all freely available. Private organizations, it's a lot harder to get.
Credit card companies, though?
It's probably not freely available, but your credit report, right? What about information in your local government? Local, state government?
Your regulations.
Right? Criminal records?
Don't they have, isn't there like a website? BeenVerified.com?
DMV?
Have you heard of that? And you just put someone's name and it tells you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you put in somebody's name and it'll give you some basic information so that you can see if you want to buy it. But yeah. The websites like BeenVerified, they collect information from all of these different places, the DMV, birth records, death records, real estate records, marriage and divorce records. All of those things are public information, right? You might have to go through a few hoops to get it, but anybody can request that information, okay? And these companies gather that information so that they can create these profiles of individuals and resell them to other companies, okay? And with the data storage costs going down, it is easier to store more and more data, getting more details about individuals. There's a particular type of data analysis called non-obvious relationship awareness, or NORA. Okay? This is where you're getting information from a lot of different sources, putting it together and finding very obscure or hidden characteristics. It's used particularly to help find criminals and terrorists. Casinos use this. Homeland Security uses this type of analysis. Okay, they give an example of a casino that in their hiring process uses this type of analysis to find things like the fact that somebody who applied at their casino shares a phone number with somebody who is a known criminal, right? That might be something, yeah, that's a possible output from this type of data analysis if they have enough information in it, okay? So when you're looking at ethics in information security, you can do some analysis and on certain circumstances to see, is it ethical, is it not? So these are kind of tenets of ethics. Responsibility, right? Accepting the costs of your actions, right? If you do a certain action, there may be a cost or some kind of obligation, okay? Accountability is where you're actually identifying who's responsible for something. Liability is where you're looking at individuals, and you're giving them the right to recover damages if they have been harmed by a particular, an organization or another party. Okay, and then due process is making sure that the laws are well known and understood, and that people know that if they are harmed in some way, that they have a higher authority that they can appeal to. Okay. Now these two right here, accountability and responsibility. Accountability in particular. Have you guys heard of Sarbanes-Oxley? Okay. Sarbanes-Oxley is a financial, it is actually a reporting requirement for organizations. A part of that law states that higher level managers have to be aware of the information that the company is reporting to governmental agencies and outside parties. Okay, so you have, and some of the ethical situations that spurred that law were companies that were putting out information in reports to to stockholders, to outside to the government, to other outside parties, that was hiding information, that was trying to, in general, trying to make the company look more financially stable than it was. And when the companies got caught with these, putting out these false reports, you had high-level strategic management that said, we're not the ones that put the report out. It's, this person in the company who does this, and they did it without our knowledge, right? So a tenet of Sarbanes-Oxley says that your strategic management has to sign off on outside reports that go to governmental agencies and stockholders, okay? Making them possibly criminally liable for any, any omissions, any factual errors that are found in there. So you had an additional incentive for the upper level management to be aware of the reports. And again, when they say that they weren't aware of it, there's it's up for debate as to whether or not they were actually aware of what was going out. Okay, so but it makes them criminally liable, so that they have a personal incentive to make sure that that information is correct. Okay. So you can take an ethical situation and you can do an analysis, and this analysis is to a certain extent a decision-making process. You take an ethical dilemma, you are looking at the problem, you're describing all of the pieces, the important facts. You define the issue, and you're identifying higher level, higher order values that are involved. Right? What are some of the, and a lot of times these ethical issues have, two different takes on these issues that are conflicting in some way. Okay? And so you have to look at the situation from both parties' views and figure out what are the high level values that they're pursuing in their particular take on that situation. Identify the stakeholders, internal as well as outside stakeholders. What are some of the different options that you could take, and what are the consequences of those options? And sometimes the consequences might be, hard to imagine. Okay, but it's sort of like, what are the pros and cons of each action? Okay, so this is basically a decision-making framework, and you can take this framework and apply it to any ethical situation. To come up with a set of possible options or actions that can be taken, because you have usually two different takes, two conflicting takes on in a particular situation. A lot of times the options are compromises in between, and there's usually no clear way to make everybody happy in these types of situations. Okay, but this is a process that you can take, and you can actually apply this to, to any ethical situation that you see. Okay. There's also some general rules that, as a society, we subscribe to. Okay, they call these candidate ethical principles. There's the golden rule, right? You do unto others as you expect them to do to you, right? So, kind of the karma thing, right? You want to make sure that you wouldn't hurt somebody if you don't want to be hurt. Okay, there's Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative. If an action is not right for everybody, then it's not right for anybody. Okay, so you can look at, organizations where maybe there is some promotion of people not because of their actual because of their actions, or because of what they know and what they do, but maybe who they know, right? And when that happens, right, you can use this principle to say that if we can't repeat that over and over again, if we could not do it the same way over and over again without hurting the organization, then we probably shouldn't do it that way at all. Okay? Descartes' rule of change. If an action cannot be taken repeatedly, it shouldn't be taken at all. So if you can't, if you have a particular action in an ethical situation, and you can't continuously make that same decision without hurting the organization, then it probably shouldn't be done. The utilitarian principle, take the action that achieves the higher or greater value. Okay. Risk aversion, take the action that produces the least harm or least potential cost. Okay, and that might be, you can kind of look at that as the lesser of two evils. Maybe there's not one that's clearly better than the other, so you want to minimize your harm. The no free lunch rule, the assumption that everything that's out there is the work of somebody else and that they expect to get paid for that in some way, shape, or form. When we think about open source software, okay? You guys, for open source software, do you know the two major characteristics of open source software? Open source software is free to use, okay? And the code for that software is freely available online. Okay, so for proprietary software like Windows, like the Mac operating systems, there's most likely no place online that you can find that code. It's proprietary. The companies keep that, don't share that information with everybody. Open source software is software that is the result of a community who supports the software, makes it available to others, and invites people to make changes and improve the software. Okay? With this, applying this no free lunch rule to that, the expectation is if you're going to use the software and you're going to improve on it, you make changes to it, you streamline it, you do something that improves it, that you will share that improvement with the community at large. Okay, so it's not necessarily that there's somebody that owns that software, but it's the idea that you'll pay, you'll pay back if you should work on it. Okay. There's also professional codes of conduct that that dictate what is acceptable in different different professions. Right? You have, the medical, American Medical Association, but a lot of these professional organizations set down a set of rules that their members need to abide by in order to be a part of that organization. Okay? In your real world issues, there's usually different sets of interests that are pitted against one another, creating these ethical issues. Okay. Privacy is one of the major issues in regards to the internet and the use of internet technologies. It's very easy for organizations to collect a lot of information about individuals. And a lot of organizations, in order to do business with those organizations, require that you share certain levels of information with them. Okay, creating accounts and usernames for every single website or organization that you are, technology that you want to try out. Okay, but privacy, on its face is the right to be left alone. Okay, the right to be free from surveillance or interference of individuals. Okay, so with privacy, the internet has, and the internet technologies that organizations use has eroded our personal privacy to the point that we almost don't have any privacy anymore. There are articles about how to stay off the grid, right? And they give all these, you don't pay anything, you don't have any account, and you don't pay anything using any kind of credit. It's all cash. You have a P.O. box, a post office box, instead of using your actual physical address. All of these different rules. It's very hard to stay, kind of stay off the grid and stay, to create, to actually maintain complete privacy. It's almost impossible nowadays. Okay. In the U.S., there's certain laws that help to protect individual privacy, like the First Amendment, which protects freedom of speech. The Fourth Amendment, which protects our right against unreasonable search and seizure. There's other statutes, like the Privacy Act of 1974, which was actually updated, I think, in the 90s. Okay. There's this set of principles called the Fair Information Practices that govern the collection of use of information. Most big websites and organizations have a privacy policy in place. And their privacy policy dictates how they protect your information, what they use that information for. Both the U.S. and Europe have their own set of fair use practices. The European set of fair use practices and that govern the use of information by organizations is actually a lot more stringent, and it offers more protections for individuals. In Europe, there's very little actual mail, physical mail, junk mail, right? Nowadays, here in the U.S., you create a new account and you're gonna, you move services. You move from one physical location to another. You open up residential services and you're already getting junk mail and other types of unsolicited advertisements, right? In Europe, they have what's called an opt-in policy. Okay, opt-in says that they cannot sell or use sell your information to a third party without your express permission. Okay, here in the U.S. we have an opt-in policy. Oh no, we have. I'm sorry, I switched it. It's opt-in for Europe, which means that you have to give them your express permission. Here in the U.S. we have an opt-out, which means that they have your express permission unless you expressly, take that permission away. So by default, they have your permission to use your information however is dictated by their privacy policies. Okay. Some other types of changes in privacy legislation. This one, COPA, has to do with collecting information from children under 18 online. that you have to gain the permission of their guardian, their parent. Okay. The Graham-Leach-Bailey Act, this is a financial act in regards to, and it actually provides some protections for individuals in regards to financial information. HIPAA, anybody tell the class what HIPAA is?
For your medical, or for your medical release of information to other employers or people.
Right. So HIPAA governs medical information and who they can share that information with. So healthcare organizations are not allowed to share your medical information to third parties without express permission. Okay. Some of these fair information practices principles include this notice and awareness, making people aware of their information practices before they collect your data. A lot of times this is included when you sign up for a new service. There's a really, really long set of information that you go to the bottom, you hit I understand and move forward. Most people don't read all of those policies. It's kind of human nature. Choice and consent, which is another core principle, which has to do with allowing consumers to have a choice in how their information is used. For some organizations, this choice is a check button at the bottom of a form, a web form that you fill out to create a new account, right? And sometimes it's already checked in that says, I consent to this organization sharing my information with trusted third parties, is usually how they put it, right? And trusted third parties can be anybody they decide to share that information with, selling the information, etc. Okay? Access and participation, which means you have the right to view your information and to make updates if that information is not correct. For things like your credit report. For your credit information, if you're not already aware, is held by three major credit reporting agencies. And each one of them might have different versions of your credit information. So when you check your credit report, you want to check all three to make sure that they all have the right information. They have set processes in place for you to make changes to or update that information. Okay? Security, which means that organizations that have your information have to take certain steps to secure that information, to make sure that it is safe, relatively safe, right? In the beginning we talked about some data breaches where customer or employee information is on laptops that are stolen, right? So there's some companies that that see that security a little bit differently than others, right? And then of course enforcement. There has to be some way to enforce these principles, okay? Now again, like I said before, the European their directive on data protection is a lot more stringent than the one that we have here in the U.S. Okay? It requires informed consent of the consumer. You have to give them express permission to share your data with others. Okay? And that the European Union members cannot transfer data to other companies that do not have similar privacy policies. Okay, so that includes the U.S. That means that, and what the U.S. companies have put into place, because generally companies like less regulation. They want more freedom to do whatever it is that they want to do, for good or bad. Okay. U.S. businesses, in order to be able to share information with the European Union members, have created this safe harbor framework, which says that we are going to abide by the European Union principles, but we're not going to have actual regulation, governmental regulation to enforce it. We're going to, these companies are going to voluntarily enforce the European Union level data protection policies. Okay, whether and again, since there's no actual oversight, right? Companies voluntarily do this. You know, whether or not it's happening can differ from one company to another. Okay, there's some internet challenges, technological challenges to privacy. Things like cookies. Okay, a cookie is a small text file that a website can place onto the hard drive of a user that's connected to that website. Cookies can be good, but they can be good or bad. It just depends. An example of a cookie: when you log into your webmail, whether it's Gmail, Yahoo, MSN, Hotmail. A lot of times when you log in, there's a little button that says "Remember Me." You check that button, and when you come back to that website, you won't have to enter your username and password. Facebook has one of those little buttons, so you don't have to log in again. When you check that button, it is storing your username and password on a text file called a cookie that is in a folder called Cookies that the browser or that website can read every time you visit it. Okay, so convenient, yes. If it's stored on your hard drive, right? What is maybe one possible pitfall to that?
Spyware. Spyware.
Spyware, hackers, anybody who gets access to your hard drive may have access to some of your usernames and passwords that are stored on cookies, because it's very, it's pretty consistent, and it's in a folder called Cookies on your hard drive, right? Bugs, these web beacons are bugs, graphics that are embedded in email and web pages to monitor who's reading a particular message. Okay, spyware. Usually, a lot of times, spyware is installed with other types of software, and it can do things like just provide unwanted ads. If you have spyware, you might notice this happens a lot in Internet Explorer, not so much in Google Chrome and Firefox, but actually in Firefox it can happen too. If you install spyware, sometimes you'll open up Google Internet Explorer and you'll have all kinds of new toolbars that you did not install. Okay, that happens with spyware. It can just give you ads, or it can actually transmit your keystrokes. That means that every time you type and click, it's transmitting that information to a third party that you don't know. Okay, that's why you have to be really careful and make sure that you have anti-spyware and antivirus running on your computer. Okay, you have to make sure you have both. Google collects an awful lot of private data about people. If you have a Google account or a Gmail account and you're logged into that account while you're using Google, they're collecting information about your searches and associating that with your account. Google. Personally, I love Google, but some of the information, getting a quick view of all the information that they collect about you can be a little bit scary. And they actually have, if you have a Google account, you can go into, I can't remember what it's called, but there's a page that you can see all of the information that they're holding about you in different services. If I remember, I'll let you guys know, because I've seen it before, but I can't remember what the page is called. So this graphic shows you how cookies work. And again, a cookie is a text file that's placed on your hard drive. And when you come back to that website, it searches for that cookie. If it finds that information, logs you in automatically, hey, welcome back. We know who you are. We've connected that information because of the information on that cookie. Okay. And again, the thing about self-regulation and security using online services is that it's not consistent. There isn't a universal framework that all companies subscribe to. There's some small companies that you go to, smaller websites, right? They don't even have published privacy policies up. Big companies, it's really important because they deal with a lot of people and they need a level of transparency to gain their customers' trust, but not all companies are like that. Okay, and because of that, because there's no universal, standard that everybody needs to adhere to, the extent of that, the responsibility that companies might take, it can vary from one company to another. Okay. Some of the technical solutions that help with privacy. This P3P, Platform for Privacy Preferences. When you visit a company that has a P3P policy, that has that privacy policy available using this technology, your computer can request that information and it will be sent to your browser. Okay, it's made available using this technology. Now, again, there's no universal standard, so not all companies utilize this technology, but it's one technical solution that's out there to help with this. Property rights, intellectual privacy, the intellectual property is and property rights is another area that is of concern in regards to the internet, right? It's very easy to share digital copies of information, right? And to share that information without giving the owner of that a lot of times it's music and other digital goods, music, movies, books. It's very easy to share that once you purchase it, to share it with others and not pay the owner of that information for their hard work, right? There's huge struggles in regards to the entertainment industry and how the internet has affected their revenues, right? For a while, what was happening when it was actually the music industry that started to go. What were they doing when they found that individuals were downloading copyrighted information, copyrighted music, basically? Do you know what was happening?
They were catching them and sending them mail, telling them they were going to be sued if they continued to.
Yeah. They were sending letters to individuals saying that we know that you downloaded our copyrighted material and we're going to sue you. Because, and some of them, thousands of dollars per song or per download, right? Actually, the music group Metallica is one of the artists that pursued this very heavily. And they're very vocal about piracy, and pursuing people who share that information and don't pay for it. Okay. So some of the ways that you can protect, that individuals can protect their intellectual property include things like a trade secret, something belonging to a business, something that we keep secret. It's not for public consumption. It's something that we don't share with others. Apple uses this framework of trade secrets very extensively in particularly their physical products, right? Trying to get what the the newest iPhone is going to look like before they actually announce it. It can be very hard. Or easy, depending on who apparently has the prototype, because there's been a couple of leaks of prototypes where employees have left. There was one employee that left a prototype iPhone in a bar, and somebody in the media, the technological media, got a hold of the prototype and was taking pictures of the prototype and posting them online. Copyright, right? This is a right to protecting your intellectual property for being copied for the life of the author plus 70 years. So when you have you have copyrighted material, right? You copyright that material, it will be protected until you pass away, plus an extra 70 years beyond that. Okay. Patents are another major way of protecting, particularly breakthroughs, right? You have that Google algorithm, the PageRank algorithm is a patented technology. They hold the patents for that particular algorithm. Patents expire. They're only good for about 20 years. Okay, so Google's patent on that PageRank algorithm may be ending, and what's going to happen when it ends, right? You see this a lot with pharmaceutical companies, right? Pharmaceutical companies come out with name brand drugs, and they have 20 years to capitalize on that before their patent runs out, and other companies can develop generic versions of that drug, right? So some of the challenges to intellectual property rights include the fact that it's very easy to replicate digital materials, books, movies. It's very easy to transmit, especially with the larger bandwidth speeds that we have. Fiber optic home internet connections and data speeds. It can be difficult to classify software. It's very easy to compact this information and share.
Hello, Business 410 online students. Unfortunately, a part of this lecture got cut off because my video ran out. So I'm going to finish this up using screencasting software. Okay, so toward the end of my lecture, I was talking about some of the challenges to intellectual property rights, including the fact that digital media, it's very easy to replicate. It's easier now to transmit because of broadband connections. It can be difficult to classify software. And sometimes it's difficult to establish uniqueness because of the high quality of replications of digital media. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act is a law that makes it illegal for people to go around any protections that might be applied to copyrighted materials. So some entertainment materials, including audio, music, and movies, have technology-based protections on them, and for people to circumvent those things, this law makes it illegal to do that. Okay, we can also, when it comes to information systems, we can also talk about accountability, liability, and control. If there is a software that is being utilized by some kind of system, for example, maybe some software being utilized by some kind of medical equipment, and that software has a bug in it, or it has some other issue that causes an error. If that error should be life-threatening to somebody, you can look at this situation as who has the liability. Is it the company using the equipment, the healthcare providers using the equipment? Is it the hardware manufacturers who are using that software, or is it the software themselves? There's this this issue with trying to sort out who's liable in situations like this. And then, of course, with system quality itself, when you're looking at the quality of the data, and you're talking about system software, for the most part, and we'll actually visit this later on when we talk about systems development methodologies, but for the most part, it's just not feasible for most companies to put out software that is completely flawless. They test it to the best of their ability, but they make that software available to the public or to companies knowing that there's probably going to be some bugs that will be found later on. And most of the time they issue patches or other types of updates that are usually fixes for some bugs that they found or holes in their software. Many times it's for security patches. But it's just not feasible for companies to find every single bug before they release their software. When you have poor system performance, it can come from three particular sources. Software bugs, which is what I was talking about earlier. It could be hardware or facility failure. So if you are running a particular software on a piece of hardware that fails, or in a facility that has issues, that can lead to poor system performance. You can also have bad input, bad data quality input, which is actually the most common source of poor performance. And then one of the more important moral dimensions of information systems is the quality of life. In our very interconnected business environment that we find ourselves in, balancing things like maintaining boundaries between your business or professional life and your personal life. I find that because a lot of my work is actually done from home, that sometimes it's hard for me to maintain those boundaries. I have a mobile device that is connected to my work email, so I am constantly getting emails 24 hours a day that I respond to. You also have the fact that the amount of change in this environment is very, very, very rapid as compared to previous, as compared to really like the pre-internet business environment. And sometimes it can be balancing of power, because you have possibly decisions that are not being made, that are being made in a more decentralized way. And we talked about that flattening of the organization and the empowerment of lower level employees to make decisions using information systems. Sometimes that can end up with issues in balancing the power in an organization. And then of course the dependence that we have, that organizations have on computer systems. It can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. If organizations are completely dependent on a system for the production of their product or service, and that system fails them in some way, that can have a very powerful negative effect on their business. Okay, and then of course there's computer crime and abuse, and we all hear about different types of computer crime, including things like identity theft, identity theft is not a new crime, but with the availability of information on the internet, the connections that we form, it can be very much easier for criminals to get the amount of personal information they need to steal people's identity. Spam is also an issue. Companies or spam can be, we know what spam is. It's unauthorized email that shows up in your inbox, and it actually has very high costs for businesses trying to weed out spam, trying to keep it from going into the inboxes of their employees. It can have a negative effect on employment. When you're using information systems to change the way that you do business, sometimes that can end up with lost jobs. And then, of course, the digital divide, which is where certain groups in a society don't have ready access to computers or the internet. So they are, because of that, they are at a disadvantage. If there are certain services that are not available to them, information that's not, because it's only available online. And then, of course, there's the health risks. When you spend 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week in front of a computer for 5, 10, 15, 20 years at a time, you end up with what are called repetitive stress injuries. You end up with injuries in your wrists because you are using a keyboard that is putting your wrists in a position that is not natural, that is not good. You can end up with carpal tunnel and have to possibly have surgery. There's computer vision syndrome, which is usually when you have headaches or blurriness due to the fact that you're staring at a computer screen for long periods of time. Most of the time, this CVS or computer vision syndrome doesn't have lasting effects, but you just need to kind of step away from your computer for longer periods of time. We also don't know what the role of these low-level electromagnetic fields have on our bodies. The internet and the wide use of computers has only been around for 20, 25 years at the most. So we won't really know what the effects of these types of energy on our bodies. We won't know that until for probably another 15, 20 years at the least. So okay, so that's the end of chapter 4.